They called her the Iron Countess of Manhattan. Serafina Sterling didn't just run a billion-dollar empire. She ruled it with a silence so terrifying that employees stopped breathing when she walked down the hall. She had fired 3 VPs in a single month and trusted no one. But the walls of the Sterling Voss Tower held secrets that money couldn't hide. And when the most feared woman in the city finally hit her breaking point, help didn't come from the boardroom. It came from the invisible man mopping the floor in the corner, a single dad with nothing left to lose who was about to change everything. The elevator chime on the 42nd floor of the Sterling Voss building didn't just signal arrival, it signaled judgment. At 8:00 a.m. sharp, the chrome doors slid open and Serafina Sterling stepped out. The temperature in the open-plan office seemed to drop 10 degrees. She was 32, possessed a jawline that could cut glass, and wore a bespoke white suit that cost more than most of her employees' cars. "The merger files," she said, not breaking her stride. She didn't look at anyone. She didn't have to. Her executive assistant, a young man named Greg who was currently vibrating with anxiety, scrambled to keep up. "On your desk, Mrs. Sterling. The legal team from Kinsley & Oates is waiting on line 1, and Mr. Mercer is requesting a lunch meeting to discuss the acquisition rumors." "Tell Mercer if he wants to discuss rumors, he can buy a tabloid. If he wants to talk business, he can bring a signed contract. Cancel lunch. I'm eating at my desk." She vanished into her corner office, the heavy glass door sealing her inside. The entire floor exhaled. In the far corner, near the supply closet, Caleb Miller dipped his mop into the grey water of the bucket. He kept his head down, the bill of his faded blue cap shadowing his eyes. He was 35, though the grey streaking his dark hair and the weary lines around his eyes made him look older. He had the broad shoulders of a man who had built things once, but now he just cleaned up what others destroyed. "She's in a mood today," whispered Maria, the head of the cleaning crew, as she passed by with a feather duster. "Stay out of the executive zone, Caleb. I don't want to lose you. You're the only one who actually scrubs the grout." Caleb squeezed the mop handle. "I need the overtime, Maria. Lily's tuition is due next week, and the pharmacy hiked the price on her inhalers again. I'll be invisible." "Just be careful," she warned. "They say she fired the last janitor for looking her in the eye while she was on a call." Caleb nodded and pushed his cart forward. He didn't care about Serafina Sterling's reputation. He didn't care about the billion-dollar mergers or the corporate warfare. He cared about Lily, his 7-year-old daughter who was currently sitting with a neighbor because he couldn't afford after-school care. He cared that the world had taken his wife, his architecture career, and his dignity, leaving him with a mop and a mountain of debt. He worked methodically, moving from the break room to the hallways. By 7:00 p.m., the office was largely empty. The hustle of the day had faded into the hum of servers and the distant wail of city sirens. Caleb was supposed to be done, but he lingered near the executive suite. The trash bins in there hadn't been emptied. If he did it now, he wouldn't have to rush in the morning. He pushed the door to Serafina's office open just a crack. He expected it to be empty, or for her to be typing furiously. Instead, he saw the Iron Countess sitting on the floor. Serafina Sterling, the woman who made Wall Street tremble, was sitting cross-legged in the center of her pristine office, surrounded by a chaotic sea of blueprints and torn-up financial reports. Her expensive heels were kicked off, her head was in her hands, and she was sobbing. It wasn't a loud cry, it was the silent, shaking heave of someone who has been holding their breath for a decade. Caleb froze. The smart thing, the survival thing, was to back away slowly, let the door click shut, and run. If she saw him, he was fired. No billionaire wanted a witness to their weakness. He started to pull the door closed, but then he saw it. Spread out on the floor before her wasn't just paperwork. It was a shattered architectural model. A complex, beautiful rendering of a futuristic eco-hub, the Project Chimera centerpiece. It looked like someone had smashed it against the wall. "I can't fix it," she whispered to the empty room, her voice cracking. "I can't fix it in time." Caleb looked at the model. He looked at the woman who was clearly drowning. He thought of Lily, and how she looked when her Lego castles fell over. Without letting himself think about the consequences, Caleb pushed the door open. Serafina's head snapped up. Her eyes were red, but the steel returned instantly. "Get out!" she snapped, scrambling to stand, though she stumbled slightly. "Who are you? Security." "Security's gone for the night on this floor, Ms. Sterling," Caleb said, his voice low and calm. He didn't retreat. He left his cart in the hall and stepped inside, raising his hands to show he was empty-handed. "I'm just the janitor. I don't care if you're the Pope. Get out before I have you arrested for trespassing." Caleb ignored the threat. He walked past her, his heavy work boots silent on the plush carpet. He knelt by the shattered model. "You can't fix this with glue," Caleb said, picking up a fractured piece of polymer. "The structural tension is wrong. The central cantilever snapped because the load distribution was off in the design, not because you dropped it." Serafina froze. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, the gesture uncharacteristically unrefined. "What did you say?" "I said the design was flawed." Caleb looked up, finally meeting her eyes. They were a piercing, icy blue, but currently clouded with confusion. "You didn't break it. It broke itself. It was doomed to fail. That model is for the Tokyo presentation, tomorrow morning," Serafina said, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and panic. "If I don't have it, the board votes me out. Silas Mercer wins. And you're telling me about load distribution?" "I'm telling you I can fix it," Caleb said. He stood up and took off his blue cap, running a hand through his messy hair. "But I need your letter opener, some bonding acetate, which you should have in the supply closet, and a soldering iron." Serafina stared at him. "You're a janitor." "And you're desperate," Caleb countered. "Do you want the model fixed, or do you want to call security?" For a long 10 seconds, the only sound was the hum of the air conditioning. Serafina studied him, searching for a trick, a camera, a trap. She saw only a tired man with calloused hands and eyes that had seen worse things than a broken toy. "The acetate is in the design lab down the hall," she said quietly. "If you ruin this further, you won't just be fired. I will make sure you never work in this city again." Caleb rolled up his sleeves, revealing a faded tattoo of a compass on his forearm. "Deal." The next 4 hours were the strangest of Serafina Sterling's life. She was used to men in suits talking at her, men who used buzzwords and power moves to mask their incompetence. But this man, Caleb, spoke very little. He moved with a surgeon's precision. He stripped the model down to its base, discarding the flashy, unstable exterior pieces that the expensive architects had insisted upon. He sat on the floor of her billion-dollar office, smelling faintly of lemon cleaner and old coffee, and reworked the entire structural integrity of Project Chimera. Serafina sat in her leather chair, watching him. She should be preparing her speech. She should be calling her lawyers. Instead, she found herself fetching him water. "You're not just a janitor," she said around 2:00 a.m. The city lights outside were a blur of gold and black. Caleb didn't look up from the delicate truss he was bonding. "I was an architect, a long time ago." "What happened?" "Life," Caleb said shortly. "The economy crashed. My firm went under. My wife got sick." He paused, his hand hesitating for just a fraction of a second before stabilizing. Cancer doesn't care about your blueprints. By the time she passed, the medical bills had taken the house, the savings and the career. Now I have a daughter, and this job pays for her insurance. Serafina felt a strange pang in her chest, a sensation she hadn't felt in years. Empathy. She squashed it down. Feelings were liabilities. "Why help me?" she asked. "Everyone in this building hates me. I'm sure you've heard the stories. The Iron Countess." Caleb finally looked up. He wiped a smudge of glue from his thumb. "Because I saw you crying. And because this building—" He gestured around them. "It's beautiful. But it's lonely at the top, isn't it? Besides, the design was bugging me. It was lazy work." He stood up, groaning as his knees popped. He stepped back. On the table stood a revised version of the model. It wasn't just fixed, it was evolved. Caleb had stripped away the vanity and revealed the strength of the structure. It looked aggressive, modern, and unbreakable. "It's finished," Caleb said. He picked up his cap and put it back on, instantly transforming back into the invisible workman. "The acetate needs an hour to cure. Don't touch it until the meeting." Serafina walked around the desk. She looked at the model, then at him. This is better than the original." "The original was trying too hard to be pretty," Caleb said, grabbing his mop bucket handle. "Structures need to be able to take a hit." He turned to the door. "Wait," Serafina said. Caleb stopped. "Am I fired?" "No," she said. She reached into her purse and pulled out a thick envelope. It was emergency cash she kept for travel. "Take this. For your time." Caleb looked at the envelope. It was likely more money than he made in 3 months. His hand twitched. He thought of Lily's worn-out sneakers. He thought of the empty fridge. But then he looked at Serafina. If he took the money, it was a transaction. He became just another service she bought. "Keep it," Caleb said softly. "Buy your daughter, or your niece, or whoever, something nice. I didn't do it for the cash. I did it because I hate seeing good things broken." He walked out. The next morning, the board meeting was a bloodbath. Silas Mercer, a man with a smile like a shark, had his vote of no confidence ready. He expected Serafina to arrive empty-handed, the Chimera project a failure. Instead, Serafina unveiled the model. She presented the new structural design with a confidence that silenced the room. The Japanese investors were mesmerized. The board voted unanimously to extend her contract. Silas Mercer cornered her afterward. "You pulled a rabbit out of a hat, Serafina. Who's your new firm? Foster? Hadid?" "An independent contractor," Serafina said coolly, gathering her files. That evening, as the sun set over Manhattan, Serafina waited. She told Greg to leave. She told security she was working late. At 7:15 p.m. the door opened. A mop bucket wheeled in. Caleb didn't look at the desk. He went straight to the trash can. "It worked," Serafina said. Caleb paused. "Good. I'm glad." "I looked up your personnel file, Caleb Miller," she said. She stood up, walking around the desk to lean against the front of it, crossing her arms. "You were the lead architect on the Vanguard Museum in Chicago. You won the Pritzker Emerging Prize 10 years ago." Caleb sighed, leaning on his mop. "That feels like another lifetime." "I want to hire you," she said. Caleb laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Miss Sterling, I can't wear a suit. I can't do the 80-hour weeks. I have a 7-year-old girl who needs me to make her dinner every night at 6 o'clock. I can't be one of your executives." "I don't need an executive. I have plenty of those, and they're all useless." Serafina stepped closer. The scent of her expensive perfume mixed with the smell of his floor cleaner. "I need a consultant. Someone who tells me the truth." Someone who sees the cracks before the building falls down. And the hours? You work when you want. You leave when you need to for your daughter. Triple your current salary. Full benefits for her. Caleb looked at her. He saw the offer for what it was. A lifeline. But he also saw the danger. She was the Iron Countess. Getting close to her was like hugging a glacier. One condition, Caleb said. Name it. I bring Lily on Tuesdays. She has half days at school, and I can't afford a sitter. Serafina hesitated. Children were sticky, loud and irrational. They were everything she hated. Fine, she said. But if she touches the prototypes, you're both out. Caleb extended his hand. It was rough and stained with ink. Serafina took it. Her hand was soft, cool, and manicured. Deal, she said. As Caleb shook her hand, he felt a spark. Not of romance, not yet, but of something dangerous. He wasn't just fixing a building anymore. He was stepping into the foundation of Serafina Sterling's life. And he had a feeling that fixing her was going to be a lot harder than gluing together a plastic model. But the real trouble hadn't even started yet. Because Silas Mercer was watching, and he had seen the janitor leave the CEO's office 2 nights in a row. Tuesday arrived with the grey persistence of a typical Manhattan autumn morning, but inside the executive suite of Sterling Voss, the atmosphere was brittle. Greg, the nervous assistant, was pacing by the reception desk. Ms. Sterling hates children, he whispered to Caleb, who was standing by the elevator. Caleb wasn't wearing his janitor's jumpsuit today. He wore a clean, pressed plaid button-down and dark jeans, humble but professional. She once fired a marketing director because she brought her niece to the office during a snow day. I don't have a choice, Greg, Caleb said, tightening his grip on the small hand holding his. Lily was 7, with unruly curls that refused to stay in her pigtails, and eyes that held the same deep intelligence as her father's. She wore a bright pink backpack that looked like a neon flare against the muted steel and glass of the office. Daddy, is the scary lady a witch? Lily asked, her voice carrying clearly across the silent lobby. Greg choked on his coffee. The glass doors to the inner sanctum swung open. Serafina stood there. She looked immaculate in a navy power suit, her hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. She's not a witch, Serafina said, her voice dry. Witches have brooms. I have lawyers. Come in. Caleb squeezed Lily's hand reassuringly and walked into the lion's den. The arrangement was simple. Lily would sit at the small glass conference table in the corner with her coloring books and tablet, while Caleb and Serafina worked at the main desk. Don't touch the glass, Serafina ordered Lily, though her tone lacked its usual venom. Fingerprints are the enemy of clarity. Lily nodded solemnly. Okay, I'll just draw. For the first hour, the silence was tense. Caleb was reviewing the HVAC schematics for the new Apex Tower project in Dubai. He worked with a focus that Serafina found unsettlingly attractive. He didn't use a computer, he used a red pen and a physical blueprint, slashing through inefficiencies with ruthless speed. Your ventilation shafts are too narrow on the 40th floor, Caleb murmured, not looking up. If you have a fire, the smoke extraction will fail. This is a code violation waiting to happen. Serafina frowned, leaning over his shoulder. The engineers signed off on that last week. Then your engineers are lazy, or they're cutting costs to pocket the difference, Caleb said. He tapped the paper. Look at the specs. They switched the material from galvanized steel to a cheaper aluminum alloy. It warps under high heat. Serafina felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. That switch wasn't authorized. That saves the project nearly $2 million. Where did that money go? Caleb asked, finally looking at her. Serafina walked to her computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She pulled up the procurement logs. It's listed as a supply chain adjustment, signed off by the Chief Operations Officer. Silas Mercer, Caleb guessed. Serafina stared at the screen. He's skimming. He's compromising the safety of the building to boost the quarterly margins, so he can push for a bigger bonus. It's worse than that, Caleb said, his voice grave. If that building goes up and a fire happens, people die. And since your name is on the building, you go to prison. He's not just stealing, Serafina. He's building you a coffin. The weight of the revelation hung heavy in the room. Serafina felt the familiar panic rising, the feeling that she was surrounded by wolves. She rubbed her temples, closing her eyes. You look like you have a headache. The small voice made Serafina jump. She opened her eyes to find Lily standing right next to her chair. The girl was holding a piece of paper. I told you to stay at the table, Caleb warned gently from across the desk. It's okay, Serafina said, surprising herself. She looked down at the child. I do have a headache. My mummy used to get headaches before she went to heaven, Lily said, matter-of-factly. She held out the paper. I drew this for you. It's a shield. Serafina took the drawing. It was done in crayon, a crude but colorful depiction of a woman in a blue suit standing behind a giant, multicolored wall. Arrows were bouncing off the wall. So the bad guys can't get you, Lily explained. Serafina looked at the drawing, then at the girl's earnest face. For years, Serafina had been told she was cold, unlovable, a machine. Her own father had only hugged her when the stock market was up. Yet here was a child, the daughter of a janitor she had nearly fired, offering her protection. Serafina felt a crack in her armor. It was terrifying. Thank you, Lily, Serafina said, her voice barely a whisper. She pinned the drawing onto her corkboard, right next to the billion-dollar projections. Lunchtime, Lily declared, sensing the tension had broken. Caleb stood up, smiling apologetically. I packed sandwiches. We can go to the break room. No, Serafina said abruptly. She pressed a button on her intercom. Greg, order 3 meals from Le Cuckoo, the lobster rolls, and a Happy Meal, or whatever children eat. Bring it in here. Caleb looked at her, stunned. Serafina, you don't have to. I'm the boss, she said, regaining her composure. I do what I want. And I want to talk about how we're going to catch Silas Mercer. As they ate lunch, an incongruous mix of 5-star French cuisine and chicken nuggets, the dynamic shifted. They weren't just employer and employee anymore. They were co-conspirators. And for the first time in her life, Serafina Sterling wasn't eating alone. But the domestic peace was shattered at 2:15 p.m. Lily was napping on the leather sofa when Serafina's private line rang. She answered it, her face draining of color. What is it? Caleb asked, sensing the shift. That was the site foreman at the Hudson Yards development, Serafina said, standing up. There's been an accident, a crane malfunction. They say it looks like negligence. Silas, Caleb said, grabbing his jacket. I have to go down there, Serafina said. The press will be swarming. I'm coming with you, Caleb said. You can't. You have Lily. Caleb looked at his sleeping daughter, then at the woman who was about to walk into a media firing squad, alone. He pulled out his phone. Maria? It's Caleb. I know you're on the 10th floor. Can you come up to the executive suite? I have an emergency. I need you to watch Lily. He hung up and looked at Serafina. I'm driving. You're shaking too much to hold the wheel. The construction site was a chaotic, muddy pit of shouting men, flashing sirens, and the blinding pop of paparazzi cameras. The Hudson Yards project was Serafina's flagship, a residential spire meant to redefine the skyline. Now, a 2-ton steel beam was dangling precariously from a snapped cable, swinging dangerously close to the scaffolding where workers were scrambling to safety. Serafina stepped out of the black SUV, and the reporters descended like vultures. "Miss Sterling, did you cut safety funding? Is it true the union warned you about the cables? Are you resigning?" Caleb moved in front of her. He didn't touch the reporters, but he used his broad shoulders to create a physical wedge, forcing a path through the mob. "Back up," he ordered, his voice booming with the authority of a man who had spent 20 years on job sites. "Let the lady through." They reached the perimeter fence, where the site foreman, a burly man named O'Malley, was waiting. He looked pale. "Miss Sterling," O'Malley said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Thank God nobody was killed. The main winch on Crane 4 just gave out. It snapped like a twig." "Show me," Serafina demanded. She grabbed a hard hat from a nearby table. "It's not safe," O'Malley protested. "I own the dirt, O'Malley. Show me." Caleb grabbed a hard hat too. "I'm coming." They took the construction elevator up to the 20th floor, the wind whipping around the open steel skeleton of the building. Below them, the city looked like a circuit board. They walked out onto the temporary decking near the base of the crane. The snapped cable was fraying, whipping in the wind. Caleb knelt down by the winch mechanism. He didn't look like a consultant now. He looked like a forensic investigator. He ran his gloved hand over the metal gears. "This didn't snap from tension," Caleb shouted over the wind. "What?" Serafina held on to a support beam, her hair whipping across her face. "Look at the fraying pattern," Caleb pointed. "It's clean on one side and jagged on the other. And there's residue here. Acid." Serafina's eyes widened. "Acid?" Someone weakened this cable intentionally. Caleb stood up, his face dark with anger. This was sabotage. They wanted a failure today. They wanted a media circus. "Silas," Serafina breathed. "He knew the stock price would tank if we had an accident today. He's shorting the stock. He's betting against his own company. We need to document this before snap." A sharp, metallic crack echoed through the structure. The temporary decking they were standing on lurched violently downward. "Serafina!" Caleb lunged. The floor beneath Serafina gave way. A support bolt, likely loosened by the same saboteur, sheared off. She screamed as she slid toward the open edge, 100-foot drop to the concrete below waiting for her. She scrambled for a handhold, her fingernails scraping uselessly against the wet steel. She slipped over the edge, dangling by one hand from a rebar rod. "Hold on!" Caleb roared. He didn't hesitate. He threw himself flat on the shaking deck, reaching down over the precipice. Serafina looked up. The wind was deafening. Her hand was slipping. For the first time, she wasn't the billionaire CEO. She was just a woman who didn't want to die. "Caleb!" she screamed. He grabbed her wrist. His grip was like iron. "I've got you!" he grunted, the veins in his neck bulging with the strain. "I've got you! Look at me! Don't look down!" He pulled. He braced his boots against a steel column and heaved with everything he had. Slowly, agonizingly, he dragged her up and over the ledge. They collapsed onto the metal decking, tangling together in a heap of limbs and heavy breathing. Serafina was shaking uncontrollably. She buried her face in Caleb's chest, clutching his shirt. "I've got you," he whispered into her hair, wrapping his arms around her tightly. "You're safe." For a moment, time stopped. On a precarious ledge above Manhattan, the janitor held the billionaire, and the barrier between their worlds dissolved completely. Serafina realized with a jolt of terror that she felt safer in his arms than she ever had in her penthouse. But the moment was broken by the sound of heavy boots. Silas Mercer stepped out from the stairwell, flanked by two large men in security uniforms. He was wearing a pristine suit and a hard hat that looked like it had never seen dust. My goodness, Silas said, his voice dripping with faux concern. An accident? Serafina, you really should be more careful. It looks like you're losing your grip on everything. Caleb stood up, helping Serafina to her feet. He placed himself between her and Silas. The cable was cut, Silas. We saw the acid marks. Silas chuckled. Acid? That sounds like a wild theory from a desperate man. He nodded to the security guards. Grab him. Excuse me? Serafina stepped forward, her fear replaced by the cold fury of the Iron Countess. You take one step toward him and you're fired. I don't think so, Serafina. Silas smirked. He pulled a folder from his jacket. You see, while you were playing house with the help, I did some digging. Security found some very interesting files on Mr. Miller's personal laptop in the janitor's closet. Blueprints, proprietary data, and emails to our competitors in China offering to sell the specs for Project Chimera. That's a lie, Caleb said, his jaw tightening. I never sent those. The IT department says otherwise, Silas shrugged. It looks like your hero is actually a corporate spy, a disgraced architect looking for a quick payout to pay off his debts. It's a sad story, really. The security guards moved in, grabbing Caleb's arms. Get off me. Caleb struggled, but they were heavy and trained. Serafina, Silas said smoothly. If you protect him, you're an accomplice to industrial espionage. The board will remove you by morning. But if you let us handle this, security breach. Maybe you can survive the vote. Serafina looked at the folder Silas was holding. She looked at Caleb. His eyes were wide, pleading with her to believe him. He saved my life, she thought. But he is desperate for money. The doubt was a seed Silas had planted perfectly. She hesitated, just for a second. Serafina, Caleb said, his voice cracking. Tell them. Serafina froze. If she fought Silas now, without proof, she lost everything. The company, her legacy, the power to protect anyone. Take him to the security office, Serafina said, her voice dead. But do not call the police until I review the evidence. No, Caleb shouted as they dragged him toward the elevator. Serafina, it's a setup. Check the timestamps. Serafina! The elevator doors slammed shut, cutting off his voice. Silas smiled, a predator who had just caught his prey. You made the smart choice, darling. Business is business. Serafina stood alone on the windy precipice. She touched her wrist where Caleb had held her. It was still warm. She looked at Silas. Get out of my sight, Silas, before I throw you off this roof. As Silas walked away, laughing, Serafina reached into her pocket. She had swiped something from the ground where Caleb had been examining the winch. It was a small piece of the frayed cable, covered in the suspicious residue. She hadn't abandoned Caleb. She had just bought herself time. But as she looked out over the city, she realized that clearing his name might cost her everything she owned. And she didn't care. Caleb sat on a metal chair in the windowless security holding room in the basement of the Sterling Voss Tower. He had been there for 4 hours. His phone had been confiscated. His primary thought wasn't about the prison time or the ruined reputation. It was about the time, 5:45 p.m. Maria usually picked Lily up from school if he was late, but Maria didn't know where he was. Lily would be sitting on the curb, waiting for the blue truck that wasn't coming. The thought made his chest tighten so hard he could barely breathe. The door buzzed and opened. He expected the police. Instead, Serafina Sterling walked in. She had changed out of her ruined suit into black jeans and a cashmere sweater, the most casual outfit he had ever seen her wear. She carried a duffel bag. Stand up, she said to the guard outside. Leave us and turn off the camera. Attorney-client privilege. He's not your client, Ms. Sterling, the guard grunted. I said, turn it off. Her voice was a razor blade. The guard obeyed, the red light on the camera blinking out. As soon as the door clicked shut, Serafina dropped the facade. She rushed to the table, unlocking his handcuffs with a keycard she had swiped. "Go," she whispered. "Take the back service elevator. It goes straight to the loading dock. My personal driver, Arthur, is waiting in the black sedan. He's taking you to pick up Lily." Caleb rubbed his wrists, looking at her in confusion. "You believe me?" "I checked the timestamps on the stolen files," Serafina said, her eyes blazing. "They were uploaded at 3 a.m. last Tuesday. I remember that night. You were in my office, building a Lego castle with Lily while I slept on the couch. You didn't leave my sight." Caleb felt a wave of relief, so strong it made him dizzy. "Silas won't stop, Serafina. He has the board in his pocket." "I know," she said grimly. "That's why I need you to leave. Get Lily safe. Go to my house in the Hamptons. Arthur knows the way." "What about you?" Caleb grabbed her arm. "You can't stay here alone. Silas is dangerous. If he cut a crane cable to kill you, he won't hesitate to do something worse." "I have to stay," Serafina said, pulling away gently. "If I leave, I forfeit the company. I need proof, tangible proof, and I think I know where to find it." "You need help," Caleb insisted. "You can't navigate the sub-levels alone. You don't know the building like I do. I know the vents, the service corridors, the places the cameras don't see. Caleb, you have a daughter. And she needs a world where bad men don't win," Caleb said firmly. "I'll call Maria. She can take Lily for the night. She's the only one I trust. Then I'm coming back." Serafina stared at him. For her entire life, men had only stayed when there was money on the table. Caleb was staying for the fight. "Okay," she breathed. "But we can't use the elevators. Silas has them monitored." "We don't need elevators," Caleb smirked, putting his blue cap back on. "We have the invisible army." 10 minutes later, the billionaire CEO and the janitor were standing in the break room of the cleaning staff in the basement. The room went silent as Serafina entered. 12 cleaners, mostly older women and immigrants, stared at her with wide eyes. To them, she was the terrifying figure who signed their checks, but never learned their names. "Ms. Sterling needs our help," Caleb announced. "Silas Mercer is trying to frame me and steal the company. He's the one who messed with the crane." Maria, the head of the crew, crossed her arms. "Why should we help her? She cut our holiday bonus last year." Serafina stepped forward. She looked at the worn faces of the people who polished her floors and emptied her trash. She felt a profound sense of shame. "You're right," Serafina said, her voice steady but humble. "I have been a terrible boss. I didn't see you. I treated you like ghosts. But right now, the man trying to take my chair is the man who put acid on a safety cable. If he takes over, he won't just cut bonuses. He'll cut corners until this whole building collapses on top of us." She paused, looking at Maria. "Help me stop him. And I swear, if I survive this, things will change." Maria studied her for a long moment. Then she reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a bundle of shredded paper in a Ziploc bag. "Mr. Mercer is a sloppy man," Maria said. "He thinks because we clean the trash, we are trash. He doesn't think we can read." Serafina took the bag. "What is this?" "He shredded this yesterday," Maria said. "But he didn't use the cross-cut shredder. He used the strip shredder. We saved it because it looked like a map." Caleb took the bag and dumped the strips onto the break room table. "It's a blueprint." For the next hour, the most powerful woman in New York and 12 janitors taped together a shredded document. When it was finished, Caleb gasped. "This isn't Hudson Yards," Caleb pointed to the diagram. This is the Apex Tower Foundation. Look." He traced a line in red marker. "The foundation pillars are hollow." "Hollow?" Serafina asked. "They're supposed to be solid reinforced concrete." "He's billing for solid concrete," Caleb said, his face paling. "But he's pouring hollow shells and filling the rest with construction waste. It saves millions in materials, but it compromises the structural integrity by 60%. He's building a house of cards," Serafina whispered in horror. "And there's more." Maria pointed to a handwritten note in the margin of the document. "Transfer to Cayman account, 442. Midnight, 10:15. "That's tonight." Serafina checked her watch. "The final transfer of the embezzled funds. If he moves that money tonight, he disappears and the building falls down a year from now." "We have to stop the transfer," Caleb said. "Where is he?" "The server room on the 50th floor," Serafina said. "It's a fortress. Biometric locks. Armed guards." Caleb looked at the ventilation grate in the ceiling. He looked at Serafina. "You're not going to like this," he said. The executive board meeting was scheduled for 8 a.m., but the real war was happening at 11 p.m. in the ventilation shaft above the 50th floor. Serafina Sterling was crawling on her hands and knees. Her face was smudged with dust. Her cashmere sweater was snagged. "I can't believe I'm doing this," she hissed. "Shh," Caleb whispered from ahead of her. "The acoustic sensors are sensitive." They reached the grate overlooking the main server room. Through the slats they could see Silas Mercer sitting at a terminal. 2 guards stood by the door. On the screen, a progress bar was loading. "Funds transfer. 80% complete." "We're too late," Serafina panicked. "He's almost done." "I can cut the power," Caleb whispered. "But the backup generators will kick in within 10 seconds. That's all the time we have to get down there and lock him out." 10 seconds to drop 12 feet and tackle a grown man?" Serafina asked. "I'll tackle him," Caleb said. "You type. You know the override codes." Caleb pulled a pair of wire cutters from his belt. He located the main conduit line running along the shaft. "On 3, Caleb said. 1, 2, 3. Snap. The lights in the server room died. The hum of the cooling fans cut out. "Now!" Caleb kicked the grate out. It clattered to the floor below, startling the guards. Caleb dropped first, landing in a crouch. The guards shouted, fumbling for their flashlights. Caleb didn't hesitate. He shoulder-checked the first guard into the wall and swept the legs of the second. Serafina dropped down behind him, landing ungracefully but effectively. She sprinted for the terminal. The emergency red lights flickered on. The backup generators roared to life. Silas spun around in his chair, pulling a small pistol from his jacket. "You!" Caleb stepped in front of Serafina. "Don't do it, Silas." "You persistent cockroach!" Silas snarled, aiming the gun at Caleb's chest. "Step away from the computer, Serafina. The transfer is at 98%. "I'm cancelling it," Serafina said, her fingers flying. "And I'm locking the accounts." "I'll shoot him!" Silas screamed. "I swear to God I'll put a bullet in him!" Serafina froze. Her finger hovered over the enter key. She looked at Caleb. Caleb looked at Silas. He saw the tremor in Silas's hand. The man was greedy. But was he a killer? He had cut the cable. Yes, he was a killer. "Do it, Serafina," Caleb said calmly. "No." Silas cocked the hammer. Suddenly, a stream of high-pressure, freezing, cold water blasted Silas in the face. The door to the server room burst open. Greg, the nervous assistant, stood there holding a fire hose, flanked by Maria and the entire cleaning crew who had activated the emergency hydrant in the hallway. Silas spluttered, blinded by the water, the gun slipping from his wet hand. Caleb lunged. He tackled Silas to the ground, pinning his arms. "It's over, Silas." Serafina hit enter. Transfer cancelled. Account lockdown initiated. Silas struggled, spitting water. "You think this matters? I have the board. I have the votes. You have nothing but a janitor and a cleaning lady." Serafina walked over to him. She looked down, her face illuminated by the red emergency lights. She looked like the Iron Countess again, but stronger. "I have the truth," she said, "and I have the blueprints you tried to shred." She held up the taped-together document. Silas went limp. "Greg," Serafina said, turning to her soaking wet assistant, "call the police, and call the board. Tell them to meet me here. Now." The aftermath was a blur. The police arrived. Silas was handcuffed, still dripping wet, ranting about conspiracies. The evidence of the hollow foundations and the offshore accounts was undeniable. By 2 a.m. the office was quiet again. The police had left. The cleaners had gone home, each with a personal promise of a 50% raise and full benefits from Serafina. Serafina and Caleb sat on the floor of the server room, leaning against the humming banks of computers. "You tackled a guy with a gun," Serafina said, looking at Caleb. He had a bruise forming on his jaw from the struggle. "You crawled through a vent," Caleb countered, smiling tiredly. "I think you ruined your sweater." Serafina looked down at her ruined clothes. She laughed. It was a genuine, full-throated laugh that felt foreign in her throat. "I hated this sweater anyway. It scratched." She turned to look at him. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a raw, vibrating tension between them. "You saved my company," she said. "You saved my life. Twice." "I was just doing my job," Caleb said softly. "Janitors are supposed to clean up the mess, right?" "You're not a janitor, Caleb," she said. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly, and touched his face. Her thumb grazed the bruise on his jaw. "You're the architect." Caleb leaned into a touch. "I don't have a degree anymore. Or a license." "We can fix that," she whispered. She leaned closer. "We can fix everything." She kissed him. It wasn't a tentative movie kiss. It was desperate and real, tasting of dust and victory. Caleb's hand moved to the back of her neck, pulling her deeper. For a moment, the billion-dollar empire didn't exist. There was just the man who built things and the woman who ran them, finding a level foundation at last. When they pulled apart, they were both breathless. "So," Caleb said, his voice husky, "does this mean I get a promotion?" "I was thinking partner," Serafina said, "in the firm and maybe outside of it too." Caleb smiled. "I come as a package deal. You know that." "I know," Serafina said. She looked at the clock. "It's 3 a.m. Lily wakes up at 7 now." "We should go get her," Caleb said. "We?" Serafina asked. "Yeah." Caleb stood up and offered her his hand. "We." 6 months later, the skyline of New York City looked the same to most people. But for those in the industry, everything had changed. The trial of Silas Mercer had been the media event of the season. The Hollow Foundation scandal, as the papers called it, had brought down not just a corrupt executive, but an entire network of inspectors and suppliers who had been cutting corners for years. Sterling Voss hadn't just survived the scandal, they had led the purge. Serafina Sterling had opened her books to the public, setting a new standard for transparency that terrified her competitors and delighted her investors. But the real change was visible today at the grand opening of the Phoenix Center, a community arts and eco-hub built on the footprint of an old, abandoned factory in Queens. The press was gathered, cameras flashing. But this time, Serafina wasn't standing alone behind a podium of cold steel. She stood on a raised wooden stage, wearing a white dress that softened her features. She looked out at the crowd, spotting Maria and the cleaning crew in the front row, all wearing VIP lanyards. For years, Serafina spoke into the microphone, her voice strong but warm. "I believed that strength was about how high you could build. I thought architecture was about dominating the sky. I was wrong." She turned, gesturing to the man standing to her right. Caleb Miller stood there. He wasn't wearing a janitor's jumpsuit. He was wearing a charcoal grey suit that fit him perfectly, though he still looked a little uncomfortable with the tie. He held a pair of oversized ceremonial scissors. "Strength," Serafina continued, smiling at him, "is about the foundation. It's about what you do when the structure cracks. I am proud to introduce the lead architect of this project and the new chief design officer of Sterling Voss, Caleb Miller." The applause was deafening. Caleb stepped forward, his face flushing slightly. He wasn't used to the spotlight yet. He had spent the last 6 months relicensing, passing boards, and working 18-hour days, not because he had to, but because he finally had a vision he believed in. He took the microphone. "Thank you," he said simply. "We built this place to last. We built it for the people who actually live here, not just the ones who fly over it in helicopters." He looked down. Standing between him and Serafina was Lily. She was wearing a dress that matched Serafina's, and her pink backpack was replaced by a small, professional-looking satchel. "And," Caleb added, winking at his daughter, "I had a very strict consultant who made sure the playground was up to code." Lily beamed and waved to the crowd. "Hi!" They cut the ribbon together. As the confetti cannons fired, filling the air with gold and silver paper, Serafina felt a hand on her waist. She turned to see Caleb looking at her. The cameras were snapping photos that would be on the cover of Forbes and Architectural Digest by morning. The billionaire and the builder. A modern fairy tale. But Serafina didn't care about the headlines. "You okay?" Caleb asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I'm better than okay," she said. "I'm happy. It's a terrifying feeling." "You'll get used to it," Caleb promised. Later that evening, the gala was in full swing inside the glass atrium of the new center. The room was filled with the elite of New York, but Serafina found herself slipping away from the champagne and the networking. She walked out to the terrace, looking over the East River. "Hiding?" Serafina turned. Caleb was leaning against the doorway, holding 2 plates of cake. "Just thinking," she said. She took a plate. "About the model, the one I fixed? The one you saved," she corrected. "You know, that night, if you hadn't walked in, I was going to quit. I was going to sign the company over to Silas and just disappear. I was so tired of being the villain." Caleb walked over and stood next to her. The night breeze ruffled his hair. "You were never the villain, Serafina. You were just protecting a fortress with no one inside it." "And now?" "Now," Caleb said, looking back through the glass where Lily was currently teaching a group of serious investors how to play rock, paper, scissors. "Now it's a home." Serafina looked at Lily, then back to Caleb. She thought about the empty penthouse she used to dread returning to. Now, her evenings were filled with noise, homework, cooking experiments that went wrong, and the steady, grounding presence of a man who saw her not as a bank account, but as a blueprint in progress. She set the cake down on the railing and stepped closer to him. "I have a new project for you," she said. Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I thought we were taking a break after the Phoenix Center." "This is a private commission," Serafina said, reaching into her clutch and pulling out a small velvet box. She didn't get down on one knee. That wasn't her style, but she opened it. Inside was a simple band. Not a diamond, but a ring made of polished titanium and wood, strong, unyielding, and natural. "I'm proposing to you," she said, her heart hammering against her ribs, "because I'm the CIO, and I like to initiate mergers." Caleb stared at the ring. Then he threw his head back and laughed, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. "You're stealing my thunder," he said, reaching into his own jacket pocket. He pulled out a ring box of his own. I was going to do this after dessert. Serafina's eyes widened. You were? I've had this for a month, Caleb grinned. I asked Lily for permission. She said yes, as long as she gets a dog. A dog? Serafina feigned horror. They shed. We have cleaners, Caleb reminded her. We are the cleaners, she smiled. Caleb took her hand, sliding his ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Serafina slid hers onto his. To the best team in the city, Caleb whispered, pulling her in. To the Foundation, Serafina replied. They kissed under the lights of the city they had conquered, not with money, but with the courage to be broken and the strength to rebuild. Inside, Lily saw them through the glass. She smiled, picked up a piece of cake, and whispered to herself. I told them the shield would work. And she was right. The Iron Countess had melted, and in her place stood a woman who finally knew that love was the only structure that could never be torn down. And so, the tower that cast the longest shadow in Manhattan became a beacon of light. Serafina Sterling and Caleb Miller proved that titles, billionaire, janitor, CEO, outcast, are just labels we wear. The true measure of a person isn't where they sit in the boardroom, but who they are when the walls start to crumble. Serafina found her heart in the hands of a man who cleaned her floors, and Caleb found his dignity in the eyes of a woman who needed saving. Together, they built something far greater than a skyscraper. They built a family. It's a reminder to all of us. Be kind to everyone you meet. The person you overlook today might be the only one who can save you tomorrow. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a like. It really helps us share these stories with more people. What was your favorite part? Was it Caleb standing up to the board, or Serafina finally letting her guard down for Lily? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more stories about love, redemption, and the twists of fate, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.